Welcome to my channel thing, I guess. You're probably wondering why I am a cat person because I can be, and I'm gonna make this channel interesting because I can do what I want. That said, today's theme of my little Preptober notes for you guys is what I like to call the big screen scene, which is my fancy brain idea of what I associate the climax of a story as and what it means like in terms of setting up a story. So essentially, I call it the big screen scene because when I'm thinking of my story, it's the scene that I see in my head on like a movie screen. It's usually the one I kind of have the idea of first, and then my story kind of goes out from there. So it's easier for me to have this kind of set in stone. I say not set in stone, but like able to picture it pretty well for me to have like an idea. So if you don't have your big screen scene or your climax plotted out, it's really kind of hard, I think, to navigate your story because you don't know where you're going and you're going to end up meandering around and looping back on yourself and more or less making it a lot harder than it should to get there. Because you can have like an idea like, oh, hey, my story is going to be about this, for example, Catman, who is a magic ninja. And if that's all you got and you don't know what he's trying to like do or like what the motivation for his story is, it's going to be hard to get there. So I know there's like this concept of like beginning, middle, end of a story. But for me, I start in the middle. This is that climax. And then I kind of work backwards or I start and kind of work my way toward it. But I know that and there's nothing that says that you have to write a story in order. You can write pieces, whatever you want, and then fill in the gaps if you need to. So there's like no reason you can't do that. So I actually recommend doing your big plot point first. Have that mapped out in your head at least. Know exactly how you want that to play out so you can lead up to it. Like you can make feeling like big idea, big umbrella, go down to small details from there. So let's kind of talk about like what that means though for your story. I'm assuming like you already know kind of what it is, but because let's be educational and listen to my cat face talk to you. So for example, thinking of that like you're watching a movie. Let's say you're watching The Lion King. Lion King's like my favorite Disney movie. So when you like think of the climax of that movie, like it's that part of the movie where like Simba and Scar are fighting on top of the fried rock and he throws Scar off and he has won that battle. That's like the climate, like that's what the story is leading up to is that face off with Scar so he can take over and become the king of fried rock. That video it's cinematic, it is thematic, it is a climax, it is the wrap up of what was going on in that particular story. If for example, think Harry Potter. Like if you think of that as the full series, the climax of that full series is in the last book where he has that face off which with Voldemort, where he beats he who must not be named. The whole story, all the books lead up to that moment. And I think you kind of need to know, well, I don't know what JK thinks, but that's where that led up to. That's that moment. Like I said, and again, there's nothing that says you can't start there if that's what you want to start with. So again, think of whatever one of your favorite movies what one of your favorite movies is. Think of that moment of like what is that part that you remember, like if you're telling someone about the movie. And just as a general plotting thing, make that what you kind of start with and work out from. And it could be like the finale piece and whatever, like if in the Save the Cat beat, which I talked about like last time, it's the finale of that part, like the showdown, the fight, the realization, the emotional impact. It's whatever that thing is. So you want it to be like exciting, you want it to have like high stakes. So a few more examples like ooh, like if you had to take like high school, like, literature, all of you probably did. Romeo and Juliet. You all know that story. So like the climax of that scene is like when they're in the um um gosh, I forgot what a tomb. Tomb in the tomb where, Romeo thinks Juliet's dead, kills himself. Juliet wakes up, stabs herself. That is like the climax. It's like Titanic, where they're out in the water and Jack and Rose are like on that door. So you need to a good way to plot. This is like again, just is like a train of thought thing is to ask yourself these questions like, why does my character want power? Like, what's the point if that's what they want? And then what do they want to do with that power? And how do we like establish that? So it's always like asking, just ask yourself lots of questions. Like if you ever like get in a rut in your writing, ask yourself questions to get to the big screen scene. Like make it interesting in your head. If you can see videos in your head, what's something you would want to see? Like what do you want it to look like? That's it. And then kind of work. This is like again train of thought. But I thought this might be helpful to some people to know that you can start your story anywhere and just work around from it. You can write your fun scenes if you want. You don't have to wait for them. You can write them out and you can always back and change them later. So I think that's another thing, when we're writing in school, we're really conditioned of you have to have these like certain points of it. But if you're writing for fun, you can write whatever part of your story you want and go back and change it later. Like, don't put yourself in such a box, I think. And I know it's kind of like hard to get out of that because you're like, I have to fill in all these blank spaces and get to this point. You can just write that point and like work backwards. Go back and change that point later. But just have fun when you're writing, especially if it's coming like NaNoWriMo, because that's hard enough as it is to stay motivated to write every day and get the word count every day. So whatever part you want to write to get your words in for the day, do that. Go and fill in later. That's kind of what I did last year. I got the general bit out and then I went in and fleshed out parts that needed it because they weren't as fun parts. But you know, I came back to them. Anywho, this is just my little video talking about what I like to call the big screen scene, which is the climax of your story. Make sure you have that well established, I think. At least that's what works for me. Establish that. Work backwards. Make sure you know exactly what your character's goals are, what's going to happen, how they get them, how they don't get them, if it's something that they don't get. Have that scene established, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of build your rest of the story up to it. Anywho, that's all I wanted to say in this video. So thanks for coming and check out any other Preptober videos I have as I get to them. All right, thanks. I love you guys. Bye.